Chapter 4 of Angel Food for Jack and Jill, Little Talks to Little Folks by Reverend Gerald T. Brennan. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Maria Therese. Chapter 4 The Dog That Didn't Want a Vacation. Eddie Kramer had a dog whose name was Shag. Like all boys who owned a dog, Eddie was very fond of Shag. The boy taught the little collie many tricks, and the dog liked to perform for Eddie and his friends. Naturally, Eddie was very proud of his little friend. Every day Shag followed Eddie to school. Of course, the dog couldn't go into the school with his master, but Shag waited outside on the school steps. When school was over, Shag was always on the steps, waiting for his friend Eddie. The dog even followed the boy to church on Sundays. He would wait outside the church, and after Mass, the two friends would walk home together. So you can see that Eddie and Shag were pretty good friends. Last summer, when Eddie's father announced that he was going to drive the family to California for a vacation, there was plenty of excitement. Eddie liked the idea of riding from Albany to California, but his first thoughts were about the dog. What about Shag? Would he have to stay home? Who would feed him? Who would give him a drink? The dog certainly couldn't stay home alone. Eddie begged his father to let Shag make the trip, but his father wouldn't listen. The father felt that the trip would be too much for the dog. He felt the dog would need too much care, but that wasn't the way Eddie felt about Shag. Eddie begged and teased his father to let the dog go, and, finally, the father gave in. Eddie was happy because Shag was going to California with him. At first, Shag seemed to enjoy the trip. He was full of life and very playful. But after a few days the dog seemed to lose his pep. He was tired of traveling and wanted to go home. Most of the time Shag slept on the floor of the car and refused to eat. There was something wrong with Shag, and Eddie began to worry. The Kramers were traveling through Colorado when they decided to spend the night in a house by the side of the road. Again Shag refused to eat any supper, so Eddie fixed a blanket for a bed, and the dog went to sleep on the side porch of the house. When Eddie awoke in the morning, his first thought was about Shag. He dressed and ran down to the porch. And what do you think? Shag wasn't there. The dog was gone. Well, Eddie called the dog and searched everywhere, but there was no Shag. The dog had disappeared. Eddie Kramer's heart was broken, and he didn't enjoy the rest of the trip. Eddie had lost his best friend, and he found it hard to be happy. Even though the Kramers did have an exciting time in California, Eddie's good time was spoiled. Eddie had lost his dog. Shag was gone. It was a hard blow to little Eddie. After spending 6 weeks in California, the Kramers started for home. It was a long trip across the country, a lonesome trip for Eddie. Time and time again the boy thought about his dog and wondered what had happened to him. Eddie knew that he would never see Shag again. The Kramers were home about 2 months, and Eddie was back at school. One afternoon Eddie marched out of school with the other children. And what do you think? There on the school steps sat a dog. Eddie could hardly believe his eyes. Yes, the dog was Shag. Eddie's dog was alive and safe. Shag had walked all the way home from Colorado. Eddie lifted the dog from the steps, held him in his arms, and hurried home. Even though Shag had run away, Eddie forgave him. Of course, Shag was very tired, very thin, and very hungry. Eddie, however, took care of everything, and that night Shag had the best meal that he had had in weeks. And that isn't all. The dog went to bed on a soft, clean blanket and slept soundly. Now, I don't have to tell you that Eddie Kramer was happy. I'm pretty sure that Shag was happy too. Shag got into lots of trouble and suffered a great deal during all those weeks, but he learned a lesson. Never again would Shag run away from his master. Sometimes boys and girls run away from their master. They run away from God, and they stay away from God for a long time. They don't say their prayers, they don't go to confession or receive Holy Communion. They even miss Mass and fall into mortal sin. Like Shag, these boys and girls get into trouble and are not happy. Boys and girls can't be happy when they are away from God. If you should ever run away from God, don't stay away too long. If you should ever fall into mortal sin, go back to God as soon as you can. No matter how many times you run away from God, He is always ready to take you back. God is always ready to forgive you. He is always patient and very kind. God never shuts the door on anybody. He hates sin, but He loves sinners, especially when they come back to Him. God knows that little children need Him. That's why He is always so kind to them. Children, if you ever make the mistake of running away from God, go back to Him quickly. How can you go back to God? Go to confession. End of chapter 4.